Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I am your host Hajra Satti and I'm very glad that I've been joined by Fahim Bangesh. Today happens to be 1st of May and it is being observed as Labour Day across the world. Assalamu alaikum Fahim, and how are you doing today?
Walaikum assalam, doing very well, and first of all, happy Labour Day.
Thank you so much. And I think
after all, we're also labourers.
Yes. And do you wonder that why are we, having the program on the 1st of the way? Shouldn't we be a holiday?
We should be having a day off.
Right.
Definitely.
That's true. But that was on the lighter note. But again, the world observed this Labour Day because this is the day that we celebrate the rights, particularly of the labour across the world, and we have seen especially that how labour is maltreated and they're not treated right when it comes to granting their right, and there was an entire movement which led to granting them their right on, and that is why particularly on the 1st of May it is observed as the World Labour Day. But when we talk about the contemporary forms of what is the slavery and how it is still existing in this modern 21st century, we will find that there are lots of manifestation of that, not just globally but locally in the Pakistan. So for example, we see that there's plenty of the child labor going on. We will find that plenty of children, they're out of the school, they're performing very laborious tasks, be it the brick kilns or in the houses as the servants or as the maids, and this is something that we need to talk about.
We don't just see that in smaller cities, we also see that in the capital cities, big cities. We see that on the little restaurants and little hotels, especially if you go and want to have some tea somewhere, you will see small young children working over there, and nobody really pays much attention that it's a child who should not be working here. And definitely something needs to be done. There are organizations, there are different platforms where voices can be raised, especially like the organization like the International Labour Organization.
That's very true, and I think every year International Labour Organization releases a report where they document the slavery and the worst form of the labour practices that are happening, and there are lots of protections when we talk about the labour rights in Pakistan granted in the constitution, but how aware people are of this particular phenomena, the protections that are granted to them, and how can they utilize them best. And when we talk about the labour, it's not limited to the child labour. We also see that in terms of the the household help that we employ, right, how they are mistreated, how they are maltreated. And when we talk about the modern form of the slavery, it is existing in terms of the human trafficking. We are also going to touch upon them, that how it is also desecrating the rights of the labour when we talk about it. So without any further ado, we are very glad that we have been joined by two wonderful personalities in our studio who are going to shed some light on what are the modern and the major form of the slavery and how we can grant the rights to the labour, especially as of now when we talk about the Labour Day that happens to be on the 1st of May. So we are very glad that we have been joined by a beauty with the brain who is a constant guest on our studio, and she not just delight us through our conversation, but it is also very inspiring lady. We are very glad that we have been joined by Ms. Afshan Tehseen Bajwa, who also happens to be the former chairperson of the NCRC. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining us.
Walaikum assalam, and a very good morning and happy Labour Day to you and everybody all over the globe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And with Ms. Afshan, we have, of course, again, one of the guests who often comes to PTV World, and we're very pleased to announce Zameer Awan Sahab, who's an analyst and former diplomat. Zameer Sahab, welcome to PTV World and happy Labour Day.
Thank you. The same to you.
Thank you. Now, of course, taking the discussion forward, and I would start with Afshan Saiba. You happen to be the former chairperson of the IRC.
NCRC, right?
NCRC, yes. Of course. Thank you. Now, we do see, like we mentioned in our introduction, we do see a lot of children who are working not just on brick kilns, they're working in the biggest cities as house helps, and here and there we do see the examples. Platforms like the NCRC do exist. But what about the practical implications? Because we still do see child labour. The rights of children are being usurped here and there, every now and then, on an everyday basis. So, and also I was watching a documentary, which I will touch upon after you answer this question, because then that will be too many questions. So, yeah.
Definitely. First of all, thank you very much. I really want to appreciate for bringing up that issue. No matter it is a global issue, but Pakistan is, one of those countries where almost 12.5 million to 15 million children are, engaged in child labor as ILO survey. And as you said, that what is the reason that so many children are child laborers? Definitely there are many such reasons, underpinning causes, and the foremost is poverty. Definitely the other reason is exploitation by society. The third reason is lots of almost 22.5 million children out of school.
True.
And then the mindset of the parents, because somewhere you see all the rural belt, parents think that their children cannot become GMs or CEOs and they cannot get jobs. So it's a social culture that, the more children you have, the more helping hands you have, and you have to engage them in earning. So it's the, the social practices also contribute to child labor. Definitely there are lots of, donors working on it, government is working on it, lots of like commissions and authorities and, such other organizations working on it, but still it's an issue at large. And the prime reason is that lots of organizations need to work together, complement each other. They're working in silos. And besides, I think most of the child labor can be addressed if the society becomes mindful of this fact, because in this particular case it's the society that engages them because of their low wages, because the children being engaged can be exploited very easily, because nobody questions you. So in spite of the fact that there are more than 100 laws on child rights, including child labor, ILO convention we all know, and there are lots of things like CEDAW and then UDHR, certain legislations, Convention on the Rights of Child, that child labor is one of the core issues which is linked. But in spite of all those reasons, we still see lots of child labor going on. Because there is an issue of implementation, there is issue of institutional frameworks that need to be strengthened, there is issue of regulation, there is an issue of monitoring and oversight bodies, because after 30 years this National Commission on the Rights of Child was established. That should have been established 30 years before as a result of Pakistan's commitment of ratification of Convention on the Rights of Child. So because implementation is weak, the institutional frameworks in Pakistan have either the financial capacity issues or the technical capacity issues, or they are working on silos. There is not as such communication, coordination, referral mechanism linked between the organizations working on child labor, between the organizations working on education, between the organizations working on human rights and child rights, between the organizations who are providing social safety nets, and lots of like technical and vocational support, things like that. So different, there are different reasons, poverty being the core one, change of mindset being the third one, definitely strong implementation and deterrence and monitoring and oversight being the third one. All these issues, make it definitely imperative that we see lots of children on the ground. And it's sad, because all of us, no matter Islamabad or any other city or any other province, you get up from your house in the morning for your job. On the way, what you see is right and left, there are beggars.
True.
There are children who are working in automobile industry. There are children who are doing domestic help, and as young as 5 years old, 4 years old, even they are just...
That chote is present in every shop.
And even in domestic help, 5 years old, in workshop domestic, 5 years old, and sometimes they are just promised food, two times a meal, 2 times a meal. So an irony. It shows, everybody says if you want to see a nation, just to see how they treat their children. So definitely it's lots of, I must say, apathy on the part of society, and lots of, I must say, national plan of action need to be developed, because last time the national plan of action was developed in, I must say, around
let's move forward this conversation, because you spoke brilliantly, and there was a nexus of factors that is creating this particular dire need, or the gap where the kids are being employed, be in the household help, or in the workshop, like he mentioned, they are being called chota in the local parlance, and they are just being offered meager salaries, or a very minimal
or even
survival
no salaries.
means. Yes, survival means to depend upon that. But now let's move forward to this modern form of the slavery that is existing in this entire globe. And I think this is one of the slavery that is impediment to causing towards the actual realization of the labor rights in the first place, right? And I think we also need to touch upon the human smuggling, which is a very major factor that is impacting the labor rights. So a lot of people, they are being promised very fancy livelihoods or the living standards abroad, and then they are being utilized or misused in the first way when they go, and that without visas. And I think they are befooled by a lot of these human agents, I would call them, because they are smuggling them across the border and they are living in a very murky work environment. So how can we control that? Obviously there are laws in place, there are institutions in place, but there's a lot of leakage in that system. How can we control that leakage?
Hajra, this is something very important, and just 2 days before I also attended a very national level, rather it was an international dialogue on trafficking in persons and migrant smuggling, and there were almost 140 representatives from diplomats from all the countries, from Pakistan, and law enforcing agencies were there. So trafficking is one of the core issues, and if you talk about trafficking, then child labor is one of the reasons. The children, adults, female are trafficked, and then they are either within the country they are engaged in child labor and all other relevant exploitation things. Since it's not a topic, I don't want to touch it. And then even cross-border trafficking and migrant smuggling. So if you see the famous case of Rizwana, who was beaten almost to death, but luckily she survived, that was also a case of traffic. But no matter that in 2018, the laws on the trafficking in person and migrant smuggling were formulated. The rules under those laws were also formulated, and then organizations like UNODC, who has a prime mandate of working on trafficking, they have done huge investment on training and capacity building of police, FIA, judiciary, and all other communities on trafficking, but still a lot needs to be done, because in Pakistan, again, I would say that we have to prioritize the issues. The day when we will be seeing the development from the lens of human rights, the change will come that day. So as compared to economic growth and other factors, human rights, maybe we need to put them more focus. It's a definitely a global language. So all these children, there was a famous case in Karachi, Arzu case, and that was indeed again a case of trafficking. And there are a number of such cases. If you see the data, and a huge data is there, because now under right to information, lots of organizations has gathered data from police and they have compiled reports. When I was the chairperson, there was a definitely brief we had compiled, there are lots of information available. So the strange thing is that the general public don't know about trafficking. Lots of case histories were discussed in that workshop, and even day and night organizations bring such people who were victim of trafficking. Luckily, those who survived, they shared how it was such a I must say dangerous task to be engaged, or maybe in smuggling they give money in the prospects of green pastures, better life when they go to any other country. There was a Greece incident in which hundreds of people from Pakistan had definitely they had lost their lives. So all these issues are again related to the implementation of the laws, and on the other hand the society, how much society is aware, how much society is vigilant, how much society is watchful. And normally in certain cases where there are violations of human rights, we always put onus on the government being the duty bearer. But under this case of labor, exploitation, neglect, commercial exploitation, we say that 99% the onus comes on the society, because normally those who are rich, normally those who are powerful, normally those who are in a position to exploit, they exploit the vulnerable, they exploit the poor, they exploit the ones who cannot do anything, because they have to survive out of maybe poverty, maybe they are orphans, maybe they are no ones, they are on the roads, maybe they don't have caretakers, So those people, those who are in power, be it's a domestic labor, the rich people, or maybe in the workshops, automobiles, or anywhere in the name of trafficking, they are trafficked and they are used for heinous crimes.
Exploitation is a very lovely word you used here, quite an apt word, I must say. And another beautiful expression, you have to see it from the lens of human rights, right? That's correct. Now, Zameer Saab, coming to you now. Zameer Saab, we talk of exploitation on a big level, and then there is exploitation on a smaller level. In the private institutions, we do see that as far as human rights are concerned, as far as labor laws are concerned, because I've seen it from my own eyes in different private institutions where people are not given their due right. Salaries aside, when they fire employees, they're not given the amount that they owe to the employee. And there are loopholes in the laws, there are loopholes in the contract, which a normal layman does not know. Don't you think that we need to make people more aware as far as human rights are concerned, as far as these laws are concerned? Because people in Pakistan generally don't know about their rights.
Thank you. First of all, I will share my opinion in this way, that it is a global phenomenon.
Right.
Being a diplomat and professor, I have been to many countries. I spent around 27 years abroad. I have seen similar cases all over the world. Even the developed world have almost the same cases.
Right.
Maybe the degree of intensity of exploitation of the labor force is different, but even developed world also have the similar problem. Coming back to the Pakistan situation, first of all, I endorse all of the views, whatever Madam Afshan Bajwa has said. I fully agree and endorse. Let me come to your question directly. It is the mindset. First of all, we have to think who is the beneficiary of exploiting the labor or child labor. The beneficiary is the elite. So we have to educate the elite. We have to sensitize the elite, the beneficiaries. Of course, as a government, they have the rules, regulation, laws and codes, and many NGOs are there to protect the labor, but definitely the beneficiary is enjoying. We are misusing and we are exploiting. So there is a need to sensitize and make the awareness among the elite and the ruling class or the upper class not to exploit the laborers.
Right, and I think let's develop this conversation further, and let's strike some of the balance in that conversation. So I'll come to Ms. Afshan, and we've seen, yes, people are getting exploited, and we also touched upon the modern form of the slavery that are still existing in this modern 21st century, but we also see that there are labor unions who are protecting the rights of the laborers, and across the world, it's not just Pakistan. We see that phenomena in England there, because the nurses were protesting under the labor unions because they felt that they were being exploited and not paid enough. But again, when we talk about the conversations regarding the labor unions, we also see that in the name of protection, in the name of granting them rights or buying them the rights, we see that there's a lot of hooliganism, there's a lot of vandalism, right? And obviously the capital classes do have a stake in, degrading them or dehumanizing those labor unions, because labor's getting up and having their rights is not in their favor. But on the other hand, we do see that there are such sort of acts, vandalism, hooliganism, that taint the conversations surrounding the labor rights. So how do we strike the balance between the two, right? How do we make sure that the labor unions are acting within their ambit, and same goes for the capital classes that are exploiting the labor at a very extreme and meager terms?
Okay, first of all, let me just tell you, as far as labor is concerned, lots of good work has been done in the formal industry,
right.
And there are standards, there are SOPs, and legislation can be implemented in a better way because it's a structure. So there definitely you see lots of maybe a positive change, or lots of good work has been done by ILO organizations like ILO, and government's laws can also be definitely implemented and can be applied there more easily. The problem is where there is just general public and general communities where you cannot do anything. And we should give credit to the formal industry and to the organizations doing there, but definitely coming towards the society at large, this is one of the major issues. And sorry, I just forgot your
so I was talking about how do we strike the balance between having a good conversation on the labor rights, where we feel, because there are instances that have been recorded where the labor unions were, in the name of granting them rights or in the name of fighting for their rights, we've seen that
Yeah, definitely. No, this is one of the, I must say, important issues, and it happens, and that's why lots of formal industry normally avoids, because this is another extreme that is followed. And that's why we always believe that all the legislation should be put in place, and that should be implemented in letter and spirit, and there should be structures, because no matter all those industries, they are accountable in the name of social corporate responsibility, but these labor organizations also take another tilt and extreme. But if we see the issue as a whole in the country, I must say there are good practices and there are bad practices, and there is,
because in South Asia we do observe this phenomena of white elephants, right, where we feel that lots of institutions, particularly who fall under the government control, they have a plenty of I mean, what do you call, the workforce there, and when the government talks of institutionalizing them or reforming them, then there is entire labor who gets up and who says that the workers
I think here I would agree what you are saying, because then they get under cover of, you know, overall job structures and definitely. And I don't want to name, but even in Islamabad you would see there are few protests. It is now almost 10 years which they are here, and they just demand, give us this, otherwise we are on strike. So definitely within the particularly those who are the government employees, there are lots of such examples, because just at one call everybody gets on strike, and then they start dictating their own terms. So I don't want to name, because I have couple of such big incidents that took place here for a year from the proper government, all the different departments, and one of the thematic ministry which were for many years. And if you go to industry, there also, you know, these labor unions play a role, because my own father-in-law, he was a head of an industry, and he used to tell his horrible stories, being the GM, how I used to be blackmailed, how I used to have to surrender and compromise on certain issues, because if on one call they all so goodbye. So just with the fear of loss of, you know, the business, or within the government, the loss of all the, you know, government working at a standstill, definitely it's something which is the other perspective. But we have to see again that those who, other than governments and other than the industry, the general public, where particularly categorically children below 18, because the standard international you know, definition of child is 18 and below, where a huge chunk is being exploited, because Pakistan after Afghanistan is the youngest country in South Asia, having almost 68% population below 30. So you see lots of people, even the industry, they are employed at a very minimal age. There are no as such you know, their job security. No matter you are, everybody knows that if there is unemployed, they are engaged, and just because of this they no such contracts, no such job security. So we have to see the plight of those young people, plight of those children, plight of those parents who have no such secure social cover. So there is a need, if you said, there is one perspective where we need to focus in terms of accessing, making an enabling environment to so make them enable to have access to their rights. But on the other hand, we need to see how this exploitation of these unions and labor unions can be stopped.
Now, we shall take the conversation forward, but it's time for a short break. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
True.
Back to World This Morning, our May Day special, as I would call it. Now, taking the conversation forward, and Zameer Saab, I would like to ask you, since we're talking about exploitation, we're talking about different major issues which have resulted as far as labor is concerned, labor organizations are concerned. Now, we do need to address the root cause here. We do need to address the problem, and I think the main problem is the population. Which is out of control, out of bounds, and like ma'am, you very rightly mentioned that people have that mentality that we'll have more helping hands, but I think that's turning out to be quite counterproductive as far as the overall economy is concerned, as far as basic human rights are concerned, as far as pressure on the government and pressure on the institutions is concerned. So how do you think we could perhaps address the basic root causes instead of I think going for the symptoms or we have to first make a diagnosis before we make a treatment here. Don't you think so?
If I summarize that the economy is the basic root cause. If you have better economy, everybody has its food available, maybe the labor can be protected very well. But when there is a shortage of food, there is a shortage of jobs, and the economy is very poor, the rich people, the industrialists, or the private sector, or the formal sector, informal sector will exploit the laborers. This is one thing. Regarding the population, of course, too much population is also to some extent is the root cause. But some of the countries has used the population as a engine of growth.
Right.
If we see China, they have trained their human resource, they have trained very well their population, and they are very productive. It is their strength. In China, the labor cost is less than the other countries. This is their strength. But if we, Pakistan, use a similar approach, we educate our youth, we educate our human resource, we train them, and then of course they can have a better life and better earning. I mean, population to some extent is a reason, but not the major. It is the still our strength to have more population, and if we train them, of course it is our strength. The major thing is that the economy.
Because don't you think population and poverty are directly proportional?
I have different opinion.
Right.
Because some countries with more population has very good economy, like China.
Right, and I think we further need to develop this conversation, and when Fahim talked about addressing the core issues, I think I also echo what he is saying, and I think we also need to address a monster, because this monster strikes everyone without any fear, be it the young or the older one, and that is called the poverty. So poverty is one thing that is at the root cause of the exploitation that is going on, particularly in our society. So we do have laws in place which protect the rights of the labor, particularly when we talk about the brick kiln incidents. But I mean, yes, there are leakages in the system. Yes, the implementation aspect of it, we need to look and ponder over that. So let's ruminate over that, Ms. Afshan. And particularly when we talk about the child rights and the brick kiln incidences, I think you have something interesting to shed a light on. So please go ahead.
Okay, before I respond to that, let me just share that poverty is one of the underpinning reasons, and then poverty and population growth has a great nexus. And Pakistan is one of those countries where we have 2.4% per year is the population growth ratio, with the effect of doubling. And it is so much so that the other neighboring countries whose population would be maybe at this point after 25 years where they will reach, we will reach there. After 60 years where they will reach, we will be reaching there in 25 years. So imagine the ratio and the growth and the population with the speed with which we are growing. So we need to have strong focus of government on population control, because the resources are not growing with the speed and the population is going and multiplying with a very, very fast speed. So this is one of the important aspect we need to focus, because perpetuating poverty is giving rise to lots of issues, and then child labor or maybe joblessness and other exploitations are one of the core reasons. And then coming back to this child labor issue, let me just tell you, it was 2007 when the last time National Plan of Action on Child Protection was developed. It was 1996 when the last survey on child labor was conducted. Now good thing is that the past 2 years with the support of ILO and UNICEF, and definitely our government has taken good progress, and we have now child labor survey done in GB, child labor survey even completed in Punjab, child labor survey completed in KP. Now they have to just share the reports and develop national plan of actions on it. But coming back again to your point that what are the repercussions and how those children who are not under the focus of monitoring or maybe implementation of laws they are facing. There were a couple of cases to just share so that we can sensitize our society, the rich people, the elite, to keep these child laborers as laborers. Like one of the girl, it was very famous case and it became famous all over the world, and the famous boxer Amir had then supported that case, where a young girl who just by default, she was 7 years old, and he freed the cage, opened the cage of parrots, and those people who had beaten her to death, she was just 7 years old, and her parents' family was so poor that they could not come to collect the dead body. And the bigger thing is, and another case in Punjab, where the child, very small, 6-7 years old child, he happened to open the door of a fridge and he ate something, and again he was also beaten to death. So in most of the cases, these child laborers are poor, their parents cannot pursue the cases legally, cannot afford the lawyer's fee. So mostly in 99.9% cases, what happens is there is settlement out of the court.
Yes.
In the other case of child girl who had was beaten to death, who had opened the cage of parents, it was a 7,000 rupees settlement. So normally they cannot do anything. They cannot pursue. They are again working in different, as a domestic laborers. Their parents are working somewhere doing very small job. They don't have fee to engage a lawyer and then to help them provide legal support or maybe other support. So definitely we have to see that our society have to come up and see pay some positive contribution instead of engaging a child. Definitely they should be monitoring standards of all the regulation of those people not below 14, but if it is somebody's above 14, should be engaged in labor but not hazardous. And definitely if there are any households who keep such domestic help, there should be proper registration of that person. And then they should also have other rights, like right to education, their health, their dignity, and they should be providing those people all those basic rights as happens in the other countries. Below 14, we cannot engage them in any hazardous labor, and above 14, definitely you can work, you can do some job, but all the basic human rights should not be compromised. And there are numerous cases where there are, like I have seen number of cases. We had issued a policy brief also. Children as young as 4 years, 5 years, 6 year olds are, you can see, out of school carrying the bags of those children.
Oh, yes.
Their mothers are there.
Yes.
They and there are a number of such cases where 1,000 per month, 500 or 2 meals a day is the only thing which is provided. So you are denying those children not only their basic rights, but when all these millions of children we mentioned, when they grow up as adults in society, their mental health is totally distorted. Their positivity is totally gone. Their childhood is also gone.
And motivation to potentially do something.
The scars on their soul can never be, definitely cured. So what do you think? All these millions of people as child laborers, as people who are victim of trafficking, victim of exploitation, neglect, abuse, because then they also face other such definitely I must say the other violence issues. Then they grow up, what they've received they give back to society.
True.
So imagine, it's a vicious cycle you put them into.
Yes.
So when we say that there are lots of such violence, and people are harsh, people are not secure, and all these issues, definitely you are pouring in society a major chunk of those people who were exploited when they were young. So definitely we need to invest in them, because it's a general belief, whatever you will invest, you will harvest.
That's very correct and very pertinent to mention here. Zameer Saab, building on the conversation, what Afsha had to say here, while we were talking about population, a country like Pakistan, how can a country like Pakistan go for capitalizing on the huge growing amount of population? Because even if we talk about China, when the population grew out of hand, even they went for a one-child policy. So what do you think? Should Pakistan continue with the same pace, or should, like Ma'am Afsha was also mentioning, that the government needs to take certain steps of population control? What do you think regarding that?
Some of the countries have the negative growth rate, especially in the European and Canada and some other countries.
Yes.
They have the different sort of problems. So population is a problem, but having less population, negative growth is also a different kind of problems. So we have to create some balance. Pakistan as a government is doing enough because of our limited resources. Whatever the government can do, we are doing it. But definitely as individuals, we all have the responsibility to contribute to our nation. I mean, population, I believe growth of population is not a big challenge. The challenge is that how we train them, how we educate them, how we exploit them for the positive things.
And how
That
we
is very
channelize
important.
the energies of
Yes.
that youth. You're very right.
And I think, Fahim, there's something which Ms. Afsha pointed out, and I think we would further like to develop the conversation on that aspect of it, because that resonated deeply with me and with Fahim too, and she talked about the mental health aspect of this
Yes.
modern form of the slavery. So when she talked about that, how from the very early childhood they are given such sort of wounds that they are unable to heal themselves, and that trauma stays within them, and that is passed from generation to generation, and that is why we see that mental illnesses are across the world are on the rise. And I think one of the problem is the structural poverty that is deeply rooted within that
Because
phenomenon.
Hajra, due to that poverty, I think they will never be able to even think about going for help, for therapy, to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist,
That's
and the vicious cycle will continue. That they will keep on returning the same thing over and over again to the society, and with increasing population, that those actions would also increase.
That's very true, and I think one of the conversations that I keep hearing, especially on the mental health issue, is that especially for the people who are living in the third world countries, people living in the Pakistan, they say that because of the poverty, the conversation is on a very basic level, so they are unable to fill their bellies, and yet you are talking about something that is mental health, right? So that comes at a really high level, or that maybe is the problem of the first world countries where we are dealing with, and when third world countries, people are still striving at the basic level, that is filling their bodies, or which is a very primordial need in the terms of that, right? So what sort of conversations, Ms. Afshan, do you think we need to have as a society? Because again, there are people who say that, you know, third world countries are still struggling with the poverty, which is a very basic issue, hunger satisfying them, right? And then you're talking about the mental health aspect of it.
Because then even the lawmakers, they want to point out things which are basic, which are there, which need to be fulfilled as far as the major chunk of population is concerned, especially giving them basic food, right?
Okay. In the beginning of my talk, I had mentioned about that there is a need of all the relevant departments and stakeholders to work through coordination, communication through a referral mechanism, because we cannot invent, or we cannot overnight increase our resources. So we have to find suitable strategies. So there are few recommendations which should be employed by those who are at the helm of affairs, those who are the right people for the right job. A number of things can be done, definitely, and they are possible because different organizations have different mandates. All we need to do is connect them. Number one thing, in Pakistan, lots of poverty issues can be addressed if, you know, there is in letter and spirit implementation of Article 25A, access to education. It's been always less than 2% of government expenditure of GDP spent for the past many years and decades, to say that needs to be increased. And then there is need for, you know, such strategies where children who are out of school can be, you know, enrolled. And if it is followed more consciously, schools are there, resources are there, and there can be different shifts and lots of, you know, organizations who can support us in this regard. Secondly, there are organizations who are working on social safety nets. So those social safety nets like BISPs, like Benazir Income Support Program, like SMIDA, TEFTA, you know, NEFTEC, and lots of organizations, including the human rights ministries and departments. They all have certain mandates of providing technical skills, non-formal education, shelters, and then other such avenues of support where children, you know, below 14 or above 14 can be engaged and they can be supported, so that they should not be on the streets and they should not be doing domestic help and being exploited. Other than that, there are certain, you know, organizations who are like loans and credit organizations. So parents of those children should be engaged through to all, you know, those social safety nets or social protection programs. And there are lots of social protection programs being you know, implemented by the government. What we have seen is, when I was the chairperson and I used to go to all the provinces, even certain government departments also don't know what are the other social protection programs available. So all these social protection programs should be linked, and they should be linked with the help of labor departments and with the help of education departments, with the help of human rights departments.
Right.
So all these such service providing avenues should be linked with each other, so that they coordinate and then they provide services to those children. Last but not the least, awareness raising.
Right.
We need to employ the help of like media, like social media, so that the parents should be sensitized, so that the parents should be knowing where they can send
or
their
maybe,
children.
I think maybe we need to approach those particular communities which do not have to access to as a social media or the media, so that they can become more sensitized about the protection of their rights. But because of the paucity of the time now, let's quickly move towards Zameer Aman Sahab. So Ms. Afshan pointed out a very important aspect, which is the social safety nets or the programs which are developed, and they are structural support to the people out there. How instrumental do you think they are in terms of granting safety to the rights of the labor?
In fact, there are certain rules and regulation and laws are there. The government is doing a lot, but there is a lack of implementation, and access to these laws or knowing these laws and their rights is a big problem. We have to educate our people, and we have to.
And I think, yes, education is the key, and thank you so much for highlighting it out brilliantly out there. And today on the 1st of May, once again, we reiterate and stand in solidarity with all the laborers out there.
And Hajra, I must thank Zameer Aman Sahab for coming in and taking this time
Thank you
out
so
and
much.
being a part of our program. And of course, Afshan Tehseen Bajwa Sahiba, thank you very much for coming in here. My first interaction with you, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for coming here. And with that, we will say goodbye. Until next time, it's a goodbye. Allah Hafiz and happy Labor Day to everyone out there.
Absolutely.